Public education is a privilege, but it is more than that. It's also an integral part of a functioning society. Public education is so valuable because it allows anyone from any background to receive their education. However, it may surprise you to know that currently the system is inefficient. Today, I will be discussing how we should reform the public education system outside of just fiscal spending. Now, the inefficiency of the public education system is important beyond reasons of just tax dollars going to waste. That is important, yes, but it's also important to think about our children. They're the real ones being harmed. When they receive an improper or below par education, this will affect their futures and ultimately will affect the health of our nation and its future. This is why it's such a critical issue. And today I'll be discussing the problems of the public education system. Secondly, I will be discussing the roots of these problems. Finally, I will be discussing solutions to these problems. Now, to begin, there are two main problems that are currently within our public education system. These being declining test scores as well as the education gap. To preface declining test scores, the NAEP is a governmental organization which gives out standardized tests every year. Now, what the NAEP does is it then releases the Nation's Report Card, which basically gives summarized and averaged data across the nation to see how we're doing in our standardized tests. Well, in a 2022 and 2023 NAEP report, scores in the 9 and 13-year-old categories have declined in every single category. Now, with me, I used a graph from their website with this Nation Report Card. So this was the 2022 and 2023 ninth grade reading scores on the NAEP's Report Card website. Now, what you'll find is that there has been a decline in every single category. So this is the 90th percentile all the way down to the 10th percentile. This shows there are clear problems currently within our scores, and it's reflected. Now, those scores were from 2012 to 2022. Real quick, I just want to say the reason why I chose 2012 was because that was when the test was reformatted. It's only fair. So, what's the education gap now? The education gap is basically how wealthy kids are performing in education versus those who are less fortunate. Title I funding, or federal funding, goes to mostly lower income areas, and this is all well and good. However, this funding does not appear to work, as a recent 2025 Harvard study by Kaj Chetty and colleagues found that those whose parents are in the top 10% of wealth got a 1300 or above on the SAT about 8% of the time. Now, students whose parents were in the bottom 10% got that same score about 0.4% of the time. That shows there is a clear gap still in terms of wealth and education status. This was an overview of the problems that belie the public education system, including lowering test scores and also the education gap. Next, it is important to discuss the roots of these problems, that being COVID and bloated administration. First, COVID. COVID is a difficult topic to discuss. However, I do think it's important to discuss why it is so prevalent in education discussions. So, a 2021 Department of Education report found that scores were even worse than they had anticipated. This is really not good. They knew scores were really bad, yet they were still worse than they had thought. However, I do also want to mention it's not fair to completely blame teachers or just educators in general, because a study in January 2024 of Acta Facultia Medicae Necessis, it's Latin, by Anna Przewak and colleagues found that internet addiction led to worse academic performance. And internet addiction was very prevalent around the time of COVID. It really spiked around then and it's continued to increase since then. So that has played a part in it. However, with so much funding going to education, you'd think they would have some sort of solution to alleviate this. And next, I also want to talk about bloated admin. A 2002 meta-analysis by Charles Jacques and Wade B. Boren found a negative relationship between admin and school performance and student success. This shows that admin, to an extent, become unnecessary, and it's just wasted spending. I really do think there is a problem with administration specifically, because they also found that with teachers, when increased spending went to teachers, students did better. So this discusses the roots of the problems in the education system, such as bloated admin as well as COVID and its effects. Finally, I'll be discussing the solutions to this education crisis, including smaller classes and playtime. You'll see what I mean. So, to begin, I want to mention by saying that both of these try to be cost effective. They try to limit spending because my point is we don't need to spend more money. So, I do believe smaller classes and more spending toward teachers can help students out. For instance, in a 2022 report by Samek Halak, smaller class size led to less bullying, which led to better student performance. If you spent less money on administration and more teachers, perhaps we could achieve better performance by having more teachers in smaller classes. Now, I also believe, especially for younger kids, breaks are important. A 2023 study by Zark Aviglar and colleagues found that about 77% of 5 to 15-year-old children do not have enough exercise, and more exercise can lead to better performances. I say we give kids frequent exercise throughout the day, frequent breaks, even if they are short, as with more activity and more exercise, I believe they will perform better in school. They'll be more attentive. There are many studies out there which show that increased physical activity can help student performance, especially in younger kids, where we really see major score and testing problems. Now, we have seen the solutions to the school's issues, such as smaller classes and activity for kids. Now, to conclude, we discussed the problems in the school education system, we discussed the roots of these problems and the solutions. So, it's important to say that this is not just about money, but children's future. And we gotta really drill in this idea that there is a problem with this within the state of the school system. There's also a solution, and the solution is not money. Now, I want to encourage everyone who heard this speech today to really give it a thought, because this could be the difference for your children's future. Here are my note cards. Thank you for listening.